President Trump squaring off with another federal judge, this time for trying to block his executive order against sanctuary cities. And he's already tweeted that he's going to see them in the Supreme Court. But I'm hearing a rumor behind the scenes that he's just going to dismantle them altogether. What's the process of dismantling a court?
That would be a huge drawn-out process. And the irony is that actually the circuit itself has tried to do that in the past. The Ninth Circuit is kind of this large, unwieldy beast. And also, POTUS is right in that he said, look, what do they have, a 20% success rate? I mean, that's absolutely true. It is the most overturned circuit amongst all of them. So it would be a very long, procedurally heavy process. And I would warn President Trump against doing that right now, because it seems like he has a lot on his plate, and especially in this particular sanctuary city issue, where frankly, specificity would solve a lot of the problems. So it seems to me that the root of this issue, it's unarguable. Federal funding can absolutely be pulled from a city or a state for failing to comply with a federal law if it's preconditioned and related to the funding. Here, that's not happening. So the wiggle room that's in there that these legislative judges are making their mark on, it's really not about that. It's on technical issues that the government, if they use more specificity in their arguments and their briefs and the order itself, then we really won't be in this position to begin with.
Interesting. Well, there was an interesting murder case out of Connecticut that has caught a lot of media attention, and it was the victim's Fitbit watch that cracked the case. Have you been following this story?
Yes. And so yes to that, and also that, so for our readers, if they're not familiar with it, what cracked the case is the fact that the Fitbit actually registered the victim walking after her husband claimed that she was already dead. So it provided this evidence that the police could point to and say, actually, she was alive. And from there, they gathered more evidence. And I think it's important to highlight this case among all of them that we talk about here, like the Amazon Echo case and et cetera, where in the Internet of Things and all of the things that we are using on a daily basis that are smart and that are using this data being collected, this is all subject to warrants, and this is all subject to seizures by the government as evidence in these cases. And so in a way, you can look at it as amazing in that it's a wealth of information that can help exculpate people who are wrongfully accused, or it can help, point the finger at those who are guilty, but also that it's important to maintain our right to privacy. And that's why, back to specificity, that warrants and these things that police use to submit to these companies to get that data, why it's so crucial for it to be as specific and particular as possible so users are protected too.
Well, everybody remembers last week when Aaron Hernandez of the New England Patriots was found dead in his prison cell from an apparent suicide. But now, Emily, his attorney is pushing for his murder charge to be dropped. Is this something you see often in cases like this?
No, Massachusetts is one of the, I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not typical. But Massachusetts has a policy, basically, where it's kind of rooted in common law there, that if on appeal a defendant dies, the court vacates the conviction, so the lower court's conviction. And think of it as being rooted in, the honor of a man's reputation. And this policy was created, obviously, decades and years before now, where things like insurance and contracts and credit relies on whether or not someone was guilty, right? So I think it brings with it a whole host of complications nowadays that maybe it didn't in the past. And the point is that if Aaron Hernandez, let's say, if it is vacated, then he's technically an innocent man in the eyes of the law, because as we know, he was found not guilty for the trio of homicides that he was just on trial for last week. So that means that the Patriots, according to his attorneys, are obligated to pay him a $3.5 million bonus that then in turn would fall to his daughter, because he wasn't legally married to the mother of his daughter. I believe she was his fiance. Now note that the families of his alleged victims are clamoring for that money as well in civil suits, as we saw in the OJ trial. So it's not necessarily that it would go directly to his daughter, but that's the trail, that's the line. And that might have been the motive also for his suicide.
Interesting. Well, another high-profile case that has sent a shockwave through Bachelor fan base is Chris Soules. He was arrested after he was involved in a car crash that left one man dead. I guess he hit a tractor. I'm so upset because I just feel like he doesn't seem the type of person that would just leave the scene of the accident like this. So I'm wondering if they are the type of person that just like was so upset by what happened. Does that ever count in the favor of the defendant?
That's interesting. It can certainly mitigate the penalty. So we've talked a lot about that on this show, where certain things can affect the penalty phase. So it doesn't help whether you're guilty or innocent. That's kind of black or white. But that would be then up to the jury, for example, or the judge if it was a bench trial, to say, okay, but you know what? We acknowledge it's because you were scared. And think of it as a deterrent effect. We don't want people to get off scot-free for that, because then anyone can argue, look, I was just scared. But it means that going forward, if you were in a situation where it was the utmost fear, you panicked, or something that was semi-excusable or human, that the jury would be a little bit more patient with you or have sympathy for you, because he's facing, as a Class D felony hit and run there in the state of Iowa, up to 5 years in prison and a fine of over $7,000. So it could be totally significant for him in terms of actual incarceration time. And again, a man's life was taken, so I'm not saying that it shouldn't be a serious commensurate penalty, but that's where his reaction would fall into play.
Will his character on that show bode well for someone who watched it on the jury, or would that question be something that would eliminate someone on that jury panel if they were familiar with him on that show?
Hopefully the latter. Hopefully his set of attorneys would do a good job in voir dire and selecting the jury, of trying to find a impartial jury, meaning that they don't know who he is and they don't have a preconceived notion. And they would also try to root out, well, do they have a preconceived notion of reality TV in general? Do they judge someone who's been, now he was on 2 shows, The Bachelor and another one, things like that. So you are right. It would absolutely come on as trying to prove their impartiality.
Seems like such a nice guy. I hate that this happened, but I have a feeling his character was still in place. So anyway, Emily Compagno, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. See you soon.